Can you really become financially free? Or is that just a phrase people say on the internet? I used to wonder the same thing. And then I found a number that genuinely unsettled me. Only 4 out of every 100 people reach a point in their lives where their money works harder than they do. 4 out of 100. And here is what disturbed me more than that statistic itself. It is not because the other 96 lacked intelligence, or discipline, or income. It is because most of them never understood what financial freedom actually is, at its most basic level. Not what it looks like on social media, what it actually means in numbers. By the end of this video, I want to show you exactly that, and whether it is genuinely within reach for an ordinary person living an ordinary life. I will be honest with you. For most of my adult life, I thought financial freedom meant being rich. It meant a certain number in a bank account, a number so large that work became optional and money became irrelevant. That definition kept financial freedom at arm's length for me, because the gap between where I was and that imaginary number felt impossible. Then I sat down one afternoon with a notebook and a very simple question. What is the actual mathematical definition of financial freedom? Not the aspirational one, but the real one. What I found did not require me to be wealthy. It required me to understand one ratio, one relationship between 2 numbers that most people never think to calculate. That afternoon changed how I saw my own financial life entirely. I spend way too much time turning financial systems into data you can actually see. If what I am sharing today is useful to you, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. Before any numbers, let me give you a picture that makes the whole concept click. Imagine 2 workers. The first worker is you, trading time for money every day. The second worker is your money itself, sitting in accounts, in assets, quietly generating a return. Financial freedom is the moment your second worker, the money one, earns enough each month to cover your living expenses without your first worker showing up at all. Think of it like 2 taps filling a bathtub. One tap is your salary, strong, reliable, but it only flows when you are there turning it. The other tap is your investments or passive income. Smaller at first, but it runs whether you are awake or asleep. Financial freedom is when the second tap flows fast enough that the first tap becomes a choice, not a necessity. Here is the number that reframed everything for me. Researchers who studied the spending and saving patterns of thousands of households found that the average person needs roughly 25 times their annual living expenses saved and invested before their money can sustainably cover their costs without drawing down. 25 times. Look at this bar building from 0 as we count upward, each segment representing 1 year of living expenses stacked. If your annual expenses are $40,000, that is $1 million. If they are $30,000, that is $750,000. The number that stopped me was not the size of it. It was realizing I had never once thought about what my own number was. And what I found when I ran my own calculation for the first time genuinely surprised me. Here is the first mechanism that makes this either possible or permanently out of reach, and it has nothing to do with how much you earn. Think about 2 rivers flowing toward the same lake. The first river is wide and fast, your income. The second river is the gap between your income and your spending, the amount that actually reaches the lake each month. Most people manage the first river carefully and ignore the second entirely. The mechanism that determines financial freedom is not income. It is what I now call the savings velocity, simply the percentage of your income that flows toward your freedom number each month, rather than being absorbed by lifestyle. Watch this line on the chart in front of you. At a 10% savings rate, reaching 25 times expenses historically takes roughly 30 to 40 years, depending on your return rate. At a 20% savings rate, that timeline compresses to approximately 20 to 25 years. At 30%, closer to 15. Notice the curve does not shrink in a straight line, but it bends. The higher your savings velocity, the faster the curve accelerates. That bend at that acceleration is the mechanism most people never see, because nobody shows them this chart. If you have made it this far, I want to say something genuinely. What we are building here, understanding the real mechanics of financial freedom, is exactly the kind of clarity that changes how people make decisions for decades. If this is the kind of financial education you want more of, subscribe. Because every video on this channel is built around the same idea. Show the data, tell the truth, skip the noise. The second mechanism is the one that either shortens your journey dramatically or extends it without you realizing. And stay with me here because this is where the full picture finally locks into place. Most people think about financial freedom as a savings problem. Save enough, get there eventually. What I discovered is that it is actually a return problem combined with a lifestyle problem. Picture a set of scales. On one side, your money growing through compound returns over time. On the other side, the lifestyle cost you need your money to cover. Look at these two curves building simultaneously on the split screen. The left curve is your invested savings growing at a historical average return. The right curve is your annual living expenses. Financial freedom is the moment the left curve's annual yield permanently meets or exceeds the right curve. Now watch what happens when lifestyle expenses increase by just 3% each year. A pattern research has found affects the vast majority of earners as their income grows. The right curve tilts upward. The crossover point on this chart moves years further into the future. That creeping rightward shift, the quiet expansion of what your life costs as your income rises, is the hidden force that keeps the crossover point just out of reach for most people. Not because they are spending recklessly, but because nobody showed them this picture. Now let me show you what this looks like in real numbers. And I want you to look at this carefully because the gap is the whole story. Take a person earning $60,000 per year. After tax, bringing home roughly $48,000 annually. Their annual living expenses come to $36,000. They save $12,000 per year, a 25% savings velocity. Invested at a historical average of 7% annually, watch this compound curve build from zero. Year 1, $12,840. Year 5, $82,400. Year 10, $196,700. Year 20, $572,300. Year 25, $972,800. And at roughly year 26, the projected annual yield of that portfolio crosses $36,000. The second tap begins to flow faster than the living expenses require. Now look at the alternative line on the same chart. The same person, same income, same returns, but saving only 10% instead of 25%. The crossover point moves from 26 years to over 40. The gap between those two lines is not discipline or talent. It is understanding how the numbers behave and choosing savings velocity accordingly. Here are the 3 things I now know that I did not know before I ran these numbers myself. First, financial freedom has a precise mathematical definition. Roughly 25 times your annual living expenses in invested assets. And you can calculate your own number tonight with nothing more than a notebook and an honest look at what your life actually costs. That number is not terrifying. It is clarifying. Second, the variable that matters most is not how much you earn. It is the gap between what you earn and what you spend. Widening that gap even modestly and directing it consistently toward long-term growth is what the data shows drives the crossover point earlier. Third, lifestyle growth is the quietest and most powerful force working against financial freedom. Not because spending is wrong, but because every increase in annual expenses also increases the target number and the annual income that invested assets need to generate. So can you really become financially free? I believe the honest answer is this. The concept is real, the mathematics are clear, and the path exists. It is not reserved for people who earn extraordinary incomes or who started at 22 with a perfect financial plan. I did not. What I found when I finally understood this, when I stopped defining financial freedom as a fantasy number and started defining it as a ratio, a curve, and a crossover point, was that the question changed. It stopped being can I and started being what does my specific path actually look like? That shift, from a dream that belongs to other people to a calculation that belongs to you, is what I wanted to leave you with today. Not a promise, not a guarantee. Just the clarity of finally seeing the real numbers and knowing exactly what they mean for your own life. Financial freedom is not a destination reserved for the lucky few. It is a crossover point that becomes visible the moment you understand your own numbers.